Welcome. Come in, close the door behind you, and make yourself comfortable. Now listen, really listen. Since the moment you were born, an invisible force has been writing every page of your story. You can't see it, but it's there. In every conversation, in every thought you repeat, in every word that leaves your lips. And if you don't take control of it, it will take control of you. This is not just another self-help book. It's not a collection of feel-good quotes meant to lift your spirits for a moment. This is the instruction manual for the greatest power you possess, your word. What you're about to hear isn't theory. It's a map to unleash the power that already lives within you, the one you've likely never used in your favor. Because here's the truth. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you speak and think about every day, often without realizing it. And the most terrifying part of all, the things you say when you think they don't matter are the ones that define you the most. How many times have you said, "I can't," "This always happens to me," or "I'm a mess," without realizing that those words are direct commands to your reality? Every time you repeat them, you don't just say them, you reinforce them. You turn them into your identity. But now comes the most important question. What if you could rewrite your story? If up until now your life has been written in words of fear, scarcity, or limitation, then it's time to change the script. This book will show you how, not with empty promises, but with real understanding. How manifestation works, how your subconscious mind operates, and how language programs your life. Through these pages, you will discover how every word you speak is programming your destiny, even when you don't believe it. How to eliminate self-sabotaging language and replace it with words that empower you. How to use the power of intention so that reality begins to shape itself in your favor. How to avoid the hidden mistakes that block your ability to manifest the life you desire. This is not magic. This is science. This is psychology. This is quantum physics. It's the reason why the greatest minds in history, from spiritual masters to the most successful entrepreneurs, have all mastered the power of the word. But here's the catch. It's not enough to know this. You have to apply it. If you've made it this far, it's not a coincidence. Something inside you knows there is more, that you are meant for more, that life is not just about reacting to what happens, but about learning how to create what you truly want. And this audiobook will give you the tools to do just that. Are you ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. What you say only reveals who you are. Let me begin by telling you the oldest and greatest truth of all time. A truth born the day our ancestors discovered that a grunt, a moan, a simple sound could turn into an idea, a promise, a word. From that moment, the first time a word was spoken, humanity experienced its first great revolution, the cognitive revolution. And from then on, the course of history was changed forever. Because ever since that moment, words have not only described reality, they've created it. And here comes the hard truth, the hidden side of the moon we rarely see. Words are treacherous. They make us believe we are in control of them, when in fact they are the ones controlling us. They convince you that the world is a certain way and chain you to a story you didn't even write. From childhood, we're taught to speak, but we're never taught to listen to what we're actually saying. Every word that leaves your mouth is a pact, a command, a seed that will grow with time. If you knew how many times you've sentenced your own destiny without even realizing it, you might start taking your words and your silences far more seriously. Because yes, silence is also a decree. There are things one simply cannot hide, no matter how hard they try. The gaze of someone who has seen too much, the laughter of someone who has loved without restraint, the posture of someone carrying more than their share of weight, and above all, the way someone speaks. It's not just about the words they use. It's what those words reveal. A man can disguise his intentions, his story, and his past, but in the way he speaks, he confesses everything. Words are not merely communication. They are a mirror, a testimony of who you are and how you see the world. What you say about yourself shapes who you become. What you say about life defines how you experience it. Speaking is an act of creation. We do it every day, unaware that with each sentence we are shaping our destiny. And the issue isn't just what we say, it's what we repeat. Because what is repeated becomes installed. It becomes a mental structure, a truth. A person who spends their life saying, "I'm not enough," will end up living that prophecy. Meanwhile, someone who declares with certainty, "Everything works in my favor," will find ways to turn every difficulty into an opportunity. This is not about cheap optimism. It's about understanding that language doesn't describe reality, it builds it. And when you become aware of that power, you stop speaking just to fill the silence. In a corner of the world where few ever look, something happened that is worth remembering. A man, just an ordinary office worker, had spent years saying the same phrase to himself with the conviction of someone repeating a mantra without knowing it. It is what it is. Every time his alarm rang, every time his boss belittled him, every time he passed by the house of his dreams and looked at his cramped apartment with resignation, he repeated it. Without anger, without complaint, just as a fixed truth. It is what it is. He said it with the same ease as someone accepting that the sun rises in the east or that water is wet. Until one day, in a casual conversation, someone responded with a different phrase. What is what you create. It was one of those sentences that enter the system like a virus and begin to dismantle everything you took for granted. At first, he laughed it off, but later that night, he felt an unfamiliar discomfort. What if his entire life had been nothing more than a consequence of the words he had repeated endlessly? What if the real prison wasn't his circumstances, but the words he spoke? From that day forward, something changed in him. Not overnight, not magically, but every time he was about to say, "It is what it is," he paused and chose a different phrase. At first, it felt forced, like trying to change your diet while your body craves the old habits. But something started happening. His world began to shift. Suddenly, new opportunities appeared. People began to treat him differently. He dared to ask for a raise and got it. He met someone who inspired him to invest in a business he'd never considered before. His life took a radical turn within a year, and the only variable that had changed was the way he spoke about himself and the world. This story isn't a fairy tale. No one is saying that changing one word will magically solve your life. But here's what is real. Words are commands. They are instructions we give to our mind and to the universe. Each phrase we repeat shapes what we believe is possible. If this sounds exaggerated, observe your own language. How many times a day do you tell yourself things like, "I can't. That's not for me. That's just how I am. I'm not lucky. I don't deserve it"? How many times have you programmed your own reality without even realizing it? It's not just a theory. Science backs it up. A study from Stanford University showed that the language we use activates neural circuits that reinforce either limiting or expansive beliefs. If you constantly say, "I'm not good at this," your brain associates that phrase with past experiences and strengthens that belief until it becomes an unbreakable truth. But if you begin saying, "I'm learning, I'm getting better at this, each day I understand more," the mind searches for proof to validate the new narrative. Words don't just describe reality, they create it. Think about it for a moment. Everything that exists in the world today, from skyscrapers to symphonies, began with language. Someone had to say, "I'm going to build this. I'm going to write this song. I'm going to change the world." Every revolution, every invention, Every personal transformation began with a sentence. So the question is, what story are you telling yourself? What phrases are you repeating unconsciously that are shaping your destiny? It's not enough to read about this. You have to experience it. Starting today, try this experiment. For 24 hours, observe your language with a magnifying glass. Every time you say something about yourself, your life, or the world, ask yourself, does this phrase limit me or expand me? If it limits you, change it. It doesn't matter if you don't believe it at first. It doesn't matter if it sounds strange. The only thing that matters is that you begin giving new orders to your mind. Because if one thing is certain, it's this: what is not what is. What is what you decide there will be. And that decision begins with the word. Words don't just build personal realities. They've changed the course of human history. Some phrases have been more powerful than entire armies. Think of the speeches that shook the world. In a time of segregation and racism, Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." He didn't say, "maybe someday," or "I wish it were possible." He said, "I have a dream," and with that declaration, he changed the destiny of millions. When John F. Kennedy declared, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," he rewired the mindset of a nation. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. Many would have come out of that darkness full of bitterness, but he chose his words with surgical precision. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need an army. He needed a truth, spoken with words that pierced the foundations of South Africa. But you don't need to be a world leader for your words to define your destiny. All you need to do is look at your everyday life. Imagine a little girl growing up hearing her parents say things like, "You're clumsy," "You're a burden," "You're not enough." Words like these, repeated over and over, become her default programming. She grows up and, without realizing it, repeats those same messages to herself. She doesn't trust her own decisions. She sabotages her progress at work. She tolerates mediocre relationships because, deep down, she believes she doesn't deserve more. Not because it's true, but because someone once said it and said it again until it etched itself into her identity. Now imagine a boy growing up hearing, "You're brilliant. You can achieve whatever you set your mind to. The world needs your gifts." He develops a natural confidence. He dares to try new things. He doesn't fear failure because his inner story tells him that everything is a lesson. The difference isn't in destiny. It's in the words that programmed it. This isn't magic or superstition. It's neuroscience. The words we use reshape the structure of our brain. When someone constantly says, "I'm terrible at math," the brain strengthens the neural connections that support that belief. But if they begin to say, "I'm getting better at this every day," neuroplasticity kicks in and new connections form to support the learning. The good news is this: the process is not irreversible. No matter how many years you've spent saying things that limit you, the moment you change your language, you begin to change your mental architecture. And here's where it gets interesting. Speaking differently isn't enough. You have to feel it. It's useless to repeat, "I'm successful," if deep down it feels like a lie. The key isn't in the words alone. It's in believing them. And to believe them, you have to find proof. That's how the brain works. It needs evidence. If you try to fool it with empty affirmations, it resists. But if you show it that what you're saying has substance, it will embrace the new narrative. That's why, instead of saying, "I'm a millionaire," if you're not, you can say, "Every day I'm improving my relationship with money." Instead of saying, "I'm a genius," you can say, "My mind is capable of learning incredible things." Words are the seed, but the emotion behind them is the water that makes them grow. The problem is that most people don't water their garden with intention. They repeat phrases like, I'm unlucky in love, life is hard, people are awful, and they say them with such conviction that reality complies, not because the world is truly that way, but because they've declared it so many times that it becomes their truth. But what if you began to declare the opposite? This isn't about hollow optimism. It's about choosing, with precision, what you want to reinforce in your life. Starting today, pay attention to every word you speak about yourself. Don't let phrases slip out unfiltered, because each one is a command. Each one is a declaration of reality. If words built the world you're living in, then the good news is they can also build a new one. Words aren't just sounds. They are invisible contracts we sign with life. Every time you say, "This is hard," you hand your energy over to the obstacle. Every time you say, "I'm not good at this," you sign an agreement with mediocrity. And the worst part? Most of the time, we do it unconsciously. Think about it. How many times a day do you say things like, "I'm tired," "I never have time," "Nothing ever works out"? You don't say it with the intention to sabotage yourself. You just repeat what you've heard so often it's become your default setting. But here's the trick. The brain doesn't distinguish between what you say out of habit and what you say with intention. Everything you verbalize gets registered as an order. There's a fascinating experiment that proves this. It's called the white bear effect. A group of participants was asked not to think about a white bear. Can you guess what happened? They couldn't stop thinking about it. Why? Because the brain doesn't process negation directly. If you say, "I don't want to be unhappy," the first image your mind conjures is unhappiness. If you say, "I don't want to be in debt," it visualizes debt. The solution? Reframe how you speak to yourself. Instead of saying, "I don't want to feel tired," say, "I want to feel energized." Instead of, "I don't want to fail," say, "I want to find a solution." Sometimes the simple act of changing one word is the difference between programming your brain for scarcity or for abundance. But there's something even more powerful, the tone with which you speak to yourself. Notice someone who always says, "I'm tired." They say it with heaviness, dragging the words. Their whole body mirrors that declaration. They move slowly, breathe shallowly. Their posture collapses. Now picture someone who says, "Today is a great day," with energy and conviction. Even if they didn't sleep well, their body responds to the emotion they inject into their words. They stand taller, they smile, they come alive. Words don't just communicate. They shape the way we inhabit our body. And this goes far beyond self-help slogans. High-performance athletes understand this well. Before a competition, the best don't just train their bodies, they train their inner dialogue. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian in history, had a ritual before every race. He told himself, "I'm ready. I'm unstoppable. This is my race." He didn't say, "I hope it goes well," or "maybe I'll win." He said, "I'm going to win." Boxer Muhammad Ali used the same approach. Before every fight, he would declare, "I am the greatest." He didn't wait for others to believe it. He told it to himself so many times that it became the truth. Coincidence? Not at all. It's mental programming. And you can do it too. You don't need to be an athlete to use this principle. All it takes is observing how you speak to yourself before something important. If, before a meeting, you say, "I know this is going to go badly," your mind and your body will align with that prediction. But if, before that same meeting, you tell yourself, "I have something valuable to offer," you'll notice how your posture shifts. Your spine straightens, your voice projects with more confidence, and your energy aligns with your intention. The difference between success and failure often doesn't lie in preparation, but in the narrative you build in your mind. The problem is that most people pay no attention to this. They speak without filters. They describe themselves with limitations. They label themselves with phrases like, I'm bad with money, I'm no good at love, I'm terrible at making decisions. And the worst part is, they say it with conviction. If only they change those words for something more empowering, their reality would begin to transform. But here's the catch. It's not enough to say it once. The mind is like a garden. You can't plant a seed and expect it to bloom instantly. You have to water it, nourish it, and most importantly, protect it from weeds. Those weeds are the automatic thoughts that will try to sabotage you in the beginning. The key lies in conscious repetition, in reprogramming the mind until the new language feels natural. Because when that happens, life begins to change. Not magically, but because you start to see the world through a new narrative. And that narrative defines the opportunities you notice, the decisions you make, and ultimately, the reality you shape. So the question is, what story are you telling about yourself? Words create pathways, not just in the mind, but in the world itself. If you still doubt this, look at how speeches have changed the destiny of entire nations. A single, well-delivered message can move millions toward hope or fear. The most influential people in history weren't always the smartest or the most prepared, but they were the ones who mastered the precision of language. In 1977, a young director named George Lucas didn't say, "I hope my movie does well." He said, "Star Wars will change cinema forever." And it did. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't hesitate. He didn't apologize. His vision was so clear, so powerful that its echo still resounds in every generation that grows up with his story. In 2008, an actor named Robert Downey Jr., who had collected more failures than successes, didn't say, "I hope Hollywood gives me another chance." No. He tried again and again until he put on the iron suit and said, "I am Iron Man." And in that moment, the world believed him. It wasn't just a line in a movie. It was the declaration of a man who had fallen, who had hit rock bottom, and who, with his own words, chose who he was going to become. But before uttering the phrase that would change his destiny, he had to speak many others to himself in private, because it wasn't the suit that transformed him. It was what he dared to declare when he still had nothing, when the world had given up on him, when the industry had shut its doors and pronounced him finished. In those dark moments when no one believed in him, he looked in the mirror and chose to write a new story with his voice. He told himself, "I've learned, I've changed, I'm ready." And he didn't stop at saying it. He prepared. He came back more disciplined, more focused, with the conviction that his best version had not yet been born. And then the opportunity came. It wasn't the biggest one. It wasn't the most coveted role. But when he put on that suit, he was no longer an actor asking for a second chance. He was a man who had decided his own fate. And when he spoke those 3 words, "I am Iron Man," he did it with the certainty of someone who already was. Because the word is not just a sound in the air. It's a seed in reality. It's a decree, a bridge between the invisible and the visible. What we affirm with our voice, we affirm with our soul, and life doesn't distinguish between the actor and the character. If you say it with enough conviction, existence will hand you the script you proclaim. The world doesn't respond to what we wish for timidly. It responds to what we declare with certainty. You can say, "Someday I'll be happy," and life will leave you waiting forever for that someday. Or you can say, "Today I am happiness," and reality will begin to organize itself to prove you right. The question is, what words are writing your story? Every word spoken in those speeches was chosen with intention. There was no room for doubt. And that is the difference between those who leave a mark and those who watch life go by. But you don't need to be a renowned artist or a world leader to apply this principle. The words you use to speak about yourself have just as much impact. If every morning you tell yourself, "This is going to be a bad day," You're signing a contract with negativity. If every time you talk about your life you say, "Everything is a mess," don't be surprised when chaos multiplies. The mind doesn't question what you repeat. It simply finds ways to make it true. High-level salespeople know this very well. A study conducted at Yale University analyzed the impact of language in negotiations. They discovered that salespeople who used affirmative, confident phrases like, "This is the best option for you," closed 70% more sales than those who said, "I hope you'll like it." It's not magic, it's perception. Language defines the confidence you project, and that confidence determines how others respond to you. Now here's the most interesting part. It's not just the words you say out loud that hold power, it's also the ones you think in silence. Imagine you had two friends. One motivates you, reminds you of your worth, and pushes you to give your best. The other criticizes you, tells you you're not enough, and fills you with doubt. Which of the two do you think would make you feel better? Now ask yourself, which of those two voices sounds more like the one inside your own head? Most people live with a ruthless inner critic. They say things to themselves that they would never say to someone they love. They call themselves clumsy, useless, incapable. They punish themselves for past mistakes. They compare themselves to others until they're convinced they're not enough. And the most troubling part is this: they do it without questioning it. It doesn't matter how many self-help books you read or how many motivational seminars you attend. If your inner dialogue remains destructive, nothing will change. The key lies in reprogramming that internal voice. How? Through conscious repetition. Think about how you learned your native language. It didn't happen overnight. You didn't read a book and suddenly know how to speak. You learned by repetition, hearing the same words over and over until they were etched into your mind. The language you use when you speak to yourself is shaped the same way. If you've spent years telling yourself, "I'm bad at this," it won't be enough to change that phrase once. You'll need to repeat the new story as many times as necessary until it becomes your truth. This principle is so powerful that elite athletes, Hollywood actors, and even neuroscientists use it. A study at the University of Chicago divided basketball players into two groups. One group practiced shooting hoops every day for a month. The other only visualized themselves making successful shots. The result? Both groups improved almost equally. The brain doesn't distinguish between what you vividly imagine and what physically happens. If that's true in sports, imagine what it could mean for your daily life. If you repeat with conviction, "I am confident, I deserve the best, my life is abundant," your mind will begin to accept it as reality. And once that happens, everything you do begins to align with that belief. But there's a condition. You can't do it passively. It's not enough to say it like a checklist at the grocery store. You have to feel it. When you repeat an affirmation, you must speak it with the emotion of someone who has already lived it. If you say, "I am successful," but you say it with hesitation, your mind will reject it. But if you say it with the certainty that you are already on your way, something within you begins to shift. And that change isn't only internal. Remember, your language doesn't just affect your mind, it shapes the way you engage with the world. Speak as if what you desire is already true. Act as if you are already living the life you want. Not because you're lying to yourself, but because you're programming the reality you are about to create. So the question is, what story are you choosing to tell? Words can build empires or bring them down. There is no force in the universe more influential than language. But you don't need to look at history to understand this. Just think of the last time someone said something to you that changed your life forever. Maybe it was an unexpected compliment on a gray day. Maybe it was a criticism that made you doubt yourself for years. Maybe it was a promise that was never kept, leaving behind an invisible scar. Words leave marks. There are people who still look in the mirror and see the child who was told, "You're not good enough." Adults who still carry the voice of an absent father, a hurtful partner, a teacher who made them feel small. The words we were told 20 years ago still echo in our minds today. But the most damaging thing is not what others told us. It's what we keep telling ourselves. When someone wounds us with their words, it hurts. But when we repeat those same words in our own minds, we harm ourselves over and over again. And the worst part is, we do it without realizing. The brain is a machine of patterns. What you repeat becomes automatic. If you've spent years saying to yourself, "I'm a failure," "I don't deserve love," "nothing works out for me," those phrases no longer require effort. They've become a background program, silently shaping the way you perceive life. But here's the most important part. That program can be rewritten. It doesn't matter how many years you've told yourself the same thing. The moment you decide to change your language, you begin to change your destiny. Look at the lives of great artists. Freddie Mercury wasn't born a music icon. He spent his childhood feeling like an outsider, ashamed of his teeth, imprisoned by a shyness that felt insurmountable. But instead of repeating that he didn't fit in, he chose to believe that his voice was his power. He didn't say, "Maybe someday I'll be a decent singer." He said, "I will be a legend." And he was. When Jim Carrey was still an unknown comedian, he wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered and dated it 5 years into the future. Every day he looked at it. He believed it. He acted like a star. 5 years later, he signed a contract for exactly that amount for the film Dumb and Dumber. This isn't superstition, it's focus. When your language aligns with your purpose, everything else falls into place. But here's the trick almost no one tells you. Changing your words isn't enough. You have to change the emotion that carries them. If you say, "I'm successful," but do it with the voice of someone who doesn't believe it, your mind will reject it. If you say, "I am valuable," but deep down it feels false, the message won't sink in. The key is to unite word and emotion. Close your eyes for a moment. Think of something you've always wanted to achieve. Picture it in detail, not as a distant dream, but as a present, living reality. Feel the emotion of already having it, as if you were waking up in that version of your life, as if you were breathing inside that possibility, and now say it out loud, not as a wish, as a truth. The difference is staggering. Actors know this. Athletes know it. Entrepreneurs who've changed the world know it. It's not enough to imagine. It's not enough to repeat empty phrases. You have to feel it, because what you feel becomes your vibration, and what you vibrate inevitably reflects itself in your reality. Words are not just sound. They are energy in motion. Every time you speak about yourself, you are giving the universe instructions. So the question you must ask yourself right now is, what are you commanding? If your language aligns with what you desire, you will draw it toward you. If you keep repeating the same complaints, the same doubts, the same fears, you will only reinforce what you don't want. Speak with the certainty of someone who already knows their destiny. Don't ask permission to be who you are. Declare it. Because life doesn't respond to what you hope for. It responds to what you affirm. Chapter 2. How to say the right thing to create the right thing. Words are the invisible architecture of life. From the first sound we make at birth to the last whisper before we depart, every word we speak builds, shapes, and defines our destiny. But the problem isn't only what we say, it's what we believe when we say it. Because words are not innocent, they are programming tools. We program ourselves with every affirmation, every thought we repeat until it becomes truth. Look around you. What is the life of someone who constantly says, "I'm a mess. I never have money. The same thing always happens to me. nothing ever goes right? Now think of those who, regardless of circumstances, walk through life with an unshakable certainty that they are supported, that everything is okay, that everything has a purpose. Do you truly believe it's a coincidence that their lives reflect their words? In a corner of the world where few ever look, something happened that is worth remembering. A young man grew up hearing from his family that life was suffering, that money only came through extreme effort, that happiness was a luxury for fools who didn't understand reality. Every word he received became a brick in the prison of his mind. He grew up, studied, got a steady job, but something in his life always felt off. There was never enough. He never felt he could relax. Every victory came with a weight, as if it were written somewhere that he wasn't allowed to be completely free. One day, during an unremarkable conversation, a friend told him, "You've spent your whole life speaking as if you were a slave to existence." That sentence hit him like a lightning bolt. It wasn't his destiny. It wasn't bad luck. It was his language. Every "I can't," every "it's hard," every "that's just life" had built his cage. He decided to run an experiment. For 1 week, he would radically change the way he spoke. He would say nothing negative about himself. He would affirm no limitations. And every time he thought something difficult, he would reframe it. The result was almost immediate. Not because the universe magically conspired in his favor over 7 days, but because he stopped betraying himself with his own voice. He discovered that much of his misery wasn't external. It was the echo of his own words, repeating endlessly in his mind. Most people live hypnotized by their own speech. They repeat it without thinking, without questioning. But words are not just air. They are commands, codes that reality obeys without hesitation. The world is not what it is what you say it is. Look at those who have changed history. You'll never find someone who transformed the world saying, "I wish I could," or "it's impossible." Look at those who shaped culture, music, cinema, science. They all had one thing in common. They spoke with conviction before their reality changed. Think of the entertainment industry. Before becoming the highest-paid actor in the world, Jim Carrey used to write himself checks for $10 million when he couldn't even afford rent. Not because he believed in a cheap motivational trick, but because he understood that the mind needs evidence to accept a new reality. And if it can't find it outside, it must be created from within. The same applies to ordinary people. Have you ever noticed how some people always seem to have good luck? It's not luck, it's narrative. They don't allow their words to sabotage them. They don't say, "I'm a disaster in love," they say, "I'm still learning what kind of person is good for me." They don't say, "I'm always getting sick," they say, "My body is growing stronger every day." Life is listening. And if you whisper, "I'm a disaster," all day long, don't expect it to respond with roses. But there's something even more dangerous than what we say out loud, what we say in silence. Your inner dialogue is the real voice that steers your destiny. What you repeat in your head when no one's listening is what truly determines your life. You can stand in front of the mirror and say, "I'm amazing," but if deep down your mind is still repeating, "I'm not enough," life will follow that internal script more than any forced affirmation. That's why manifestation techniques don't work for everyone. It's not enough to repeat positive phrases if you don't actually believe them. What really changes your life is reprogramming your inner language. It's rewriting the script you tell yourself every single day. Imagine you had a personal assistant who listens to everything you say and takes it as orders to shape your life. That assistant is your subconscious. It doesn't filter. It doesn't analyze. It doesn't judge. If you say, "This is impossible," it records that and won't allow you to see solutions. If you say, "I always fail," it writes it down and makes sure you overlook every opportunity. But if you say, "I'm learning," More doors open for me every day. My life is expanding in ways I don't yet understand. That assistant will begin to look for evidence to confirm those statements. And it will find them, because that's what the human mind does. It finds what it believes to be true. If you've ever learned a new word and then started seeing it everywhere, it's because your mind is programmed to notice what it believes is important. So what would happen if you trained your mind to notice opportunities instead of problems? Language is the first layer of manifestation. No visualization, affirmation, or law of attraction technique will work if your inner dialogue is a machine of self-destruction. If you could hear the words you use to describe yourself every day, would you feel proud or ashamed? If every sentence you spoke about your life came true instantly, would you be happy or in trouble? The reality you live today is the echo of the words you said yesterday. The words you speak today will determine what you experience tomorrow. So now tell me, what will you choose to say from this moment on? Words create reality, but there's something even more dangerous. The words we don't say. What we keep inside also shapes us. What we suppress, what we're afraid to express, what we swallow out of fear or habit, those unspoken words rot within the body. Ask anyone who's carried the weight of an unspoken truth. Emotions that are never expressed turn into illness, tension, insomnia, anxiety. Life will find ways to remind you that something inside you is asking to be released. In a corner of the world where few ever look, something happened that is worth remembering. A man spent 30 years of his life in a job he hated. Every morning, he repeated the same phrase as he woke up, "I have no choice." He said it without thinking, as if it were an undeniable fact. "I have no choice." And so the days passed, the years, the decades, convinced that his life was carved in stone. Until one day, his body rebelled. An unexpected diagnosis forced him to stop. And in that imposed silence, for the first time, he dared to ask himself, what if I always had a choice? It was a simple question, but it shattered the invisible prison of his mind. It wasn't his job that trapped him, it was his words. For years he had declared that he had no choice, and his obedient mind never looked for another way out. Most people chain themselves with phrases they've never even questioned. I can't change. This is just what I got. It's always been this way. And so they go through life, repeating the same spell, unaware that they're building their own prison. Think about the greatest changes in history. They didn't begin with action. They began with words. Someone, somewhere said aloud, "This must change." And in that moment, a door opened that hadn't existed before. People think the power of the word lies in what is said in public, in what is shouted, in what is proclaimed with force. But the true power lies in what we tell ourselves when no one else is listening. Your inner dialogue is the narrator of your story. And that narrator, unlike what many believe, can be changed at any moment. But here's the interesting part. It's not enough to change the words. You must change the intention behind them. You can say, "I'm successful" 1,000 times, but if inside you still feel fear, insecurity, and frustration, your words are just noise. The language of manifestation is not a trick. It's not about saying pretty things so the universe rewards you. It's about changing the root of your thinking, speaking from a place of certainty. Look at the world around you. Every object you see was first a thought in someone's mind. Every building, every song, every invention, every revolution began as an idea someone dared to speak aloud. If words create the external world, imagine what they're doing to your internal world. Every time you say, "This is hard," your brain activates the region responsible for effort and resistance. Every time you say, "This is impossible," your neurons stop searching for solutions. But if you say, "This is an interesting challenge," or I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way. Something shifts in your mind. It begins to open doors instead of closing them. The world is full of examples of people who change their destiny by changing their language. Oprah Winfrey didn't say, "My past defines me." She said, "My story propels me." J.K. Rowling didn't say, "Nobody wants to publish my book." She said, "I haven't found the right person yet." Muhammad Ali didn't say, "Maybe one day I'll be the best." He said, "I am the greatest," and he said it so many times that the world had no choice but to believe him. And this isn't magic, it's how the human brain works. When you speak with certainty, your mind begins to look for evidence that what you're saying is true. It's a neurological phenomenon. The brain filters information and prioritizes what confirms your beliefs. If you believe the world is against you, you'll see problems everywhere. If you believe the world supports you, you'll notice opportunities where there used to be only obstacles. The trick isn't to lie to yourself. The trick is to train your mind to see what it used to ignore. If every word you spoke was creating a layer of your destiny, wouldn't you want to be more careful with what you say? Language isn't just a means of communication. It's the brush with which you paint your life. So the real question is, what story are you telling yourself? If words are the brush with which you paint your life, then why do most people keep using the same dull, faded colors? Because no one ever taught them they could change the palette. The words we choose don't just describe our reality, they program it. Every time you repeat a phrase, you reinforce a neural network in your brain. This is science, not cheap metaphysics. When you say, "I'm not good with money," your mind stops looking for financial solutions. When you say, "I'm forgetful," your brain stops trying to remember. When you say, "No one values me," you begin to act like someone who doesn't deserve to be valued. Language is an act of constant creation. If someone told you there was a word that could make a plant grow faster or wither, would you believe it? Well, there is an experiment that proves it. In Japan, a scientist named Masaru Emoto conducted a study on how words affect the structure of water. He froze water samples after exposing them to different words and emotions. When the water had been exposed to words like love or gratitude, the crystals formed into harmonious, beautiful patterns. When exposed to hate or contempt, the structures became chaotic and distorted. Now think about this. Your body is over 70% water. If words can alter the structure of water, what do you think they're doing to you every single day? But you don't need to believe in these studies to witness the power of language. Just look at your life. Listen to the people around you. Those who constantly complain live in a world of complaints. Those who speak of possibilities find them. Those who use the language of fear become paralyzed. This is what separates people who achieve extraordinary things from those who remain trapped in the same old stories. Words don't just affect what you think. They affect how you move, how you relate, how you choose. Look at any great leader, artist, or creator. They all master their language. Because here comes the most powerful truth. Language doesn't just affect the mind, it affects the body. When you say, "I'm exhausted," your body gives up. When you say, "This is impossible," your muscles tighten. But when you say, "This is going to be a challenge, but I'll do it," your physiology shifts. There's an interesting phenomenon in film. Actors who play strong characters begin to feel stronger themselves. It's not a trick, it's biology. When you adopt a posture of power, your brain releases hormones that enhance confidence. When you speak with determination, your body responds. Try this experiment. Say out loud, "This is hard," and notice how your body feels. Now say, "This is an interesting challenge," and feel the difference. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about giving your brain the right instructions. Every word you say is a command. Every phrase is a program. And now comes the big question. Are you programming what you truly want? Or are you, without realizing it, still repeating old codes that only sabotage you? Life is generous with metaphors. You just have to learn how to notice them. A few years ago, a man in New York was riding the subway, stuck in the human traffic of rush hour. He was late for work, and his mood matched the shade of a gray Monday without coffee. Suddenly, a small child slipped away from his mother's hand and ran toward him with the joy of someone who still believes the world is a playground. "Mister, your face looks like an angry bulldog," the boy shouted, bursting into laughter. The entire subway car erupted. The man, of course, tried to stay serious, but he couldn't. His face, indeed resembling an angry bulldog, relaxed. That child, without knowing it, had just given him the best gift of his life. A single phrase changed his mental state in a second. What made those words so effective? It wasn't a motivational speech. It wasn't a self-help book. It was a sincere, raw observation delivered with the carefree humor of a child, unafraid to say what he sees. Because here lies the great irony of life. Sometimes a silly sentence is more powerful than 100 pages of wisdom. This brings us to a fundamental principle about the power of words. The phrases that impact us the most are not necessarily the most eloquent, but the ones that touch us at the exact right moment. The human mind is strange. It can cling to a single insult for years, or remember an encouraging phrase for a lifetime. And the most interesting thing is this: it's not only the words others say to us that have power, it's especially the ones we say to ourselves. Have you noticed how you speak to yourself in moments of crisis? Most people don't need an enemy. Their harshest critic lives in their own head. When they make a mistake, they say things like, "I'm such an idiot. I always mess things up. I'll never make it." Now, what would happen if, instead of that, you spoke to yourself the way your best friend would? Because no one would speak like that to someone they love. When a child is learning to walk and falls, no one yells, "You're a failure." When a friend stumbles, we help them back up, yet we destroy ourselves with words every single day. And here's the trick. Your brain believes everything you tell it. It doesn't have a sense of humor. It doesn't distinguish between sarcasm and truth. If every time you look in the mirror you say, "What a disaster," your brain records it as a command. Language is a mirror of the mind. Changing the way you speak to yourself isn't a minor detail. It is one of the most powerful things you can do. Because the world is already full of people who judge too harshly. You don't need to be one more. Try this experiment. For one whole day, listen closely to how you speak to yourself. Every time you criticize yourself, pause and rephrase the sentence. Instead of "I'm a mess," say "I'm learning." Instead of "I'll never make it," say "I'm in progress." It may seem like a minor adjustment, but it isn't. The words you choose directly shape your emotional state. Your inner language can either be the poison that sabotages you or the medicine that strengthens you. The question is, which one are you choosing? There's a story that's rarely told. Not because it isn't important, but because it's so obvious. No one thinks to mention it. It's the story of ordinary days. Because we were taught to celebrate the epic moments, graduations, weddings, awards. But no one claps for the day someone simply decides not to give up. No one applauds the person who gets up after a night of doubt. The one who keeps going, even when no one is watching. The one who chooses to try again, even while trembling with fear. And yet, that is where the real magic happens. Because it's not the grand moments that define our lives. It's the small, invisible decisions we make every single day. Life doesn't change in an instant. It changes when you take 1,000 small instants and choose to do something with them. Every word you speak, every thought you hold, is a brick in the construction of your destiny. So the real question is, what are you building? If you could see your life from the outside, like a movie, what story would you be telling? Are you the character who complains about the script, or the one who decides to rewrite it? Many people believe their life is an accident, that they are where they are because that's just how luck works, because that's just how things are. But here's a truth few dare to accept. Life gives back what you offer it. If you speak the language of fear, you'll attract more fear. If you speak the language of love, you'll attract more love. And this isn't magic or mysticism, it's pure logic. Words are not just sounds, they are signals. When someone constantly says that everything is hard, that life is unfair, that nothing ever changes, what does their mind do? It filters reality to find proof that all of it is true. But when someone starts saying, "I'm finding the way," "Solutions are coming to me," "Every day I grow stronger," the mind does the same. It starts looking for proof that that is also true. It's like an internal algorithm. What you repeat gets reinforced. And here's where the big secret comes in, one that no one ever taught us. You don't have to believe something for it to begin to work. You just have to say it enough times for it to become real. Not because the words are magical in themselves, but because repetition creates conviction. When a child is learning to walk, they never say it's impossible. They just fall, get up, fall again, and get up again. Until one day, suddenly, they walk. That's how everything in life works. But adults forget this principle and replace it with excuses. That's not for me. This always happens to me. I just wasn't born for this. And what does the mind do? It believes it and acts accordingly. So if you truly want to change your life, start by changing your inner language. You don't have to convince yourself overnight. You just have to start practicing the language of possibility. Tell yourself, "I'm learning. I'm growing. Each day, a new door opens." It may sound silly, but it's not. It's reconstruction. Because life is not a destination, it's a dialogue. And every day, with every word, with every thought, you have the chance to answer in a new way. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't matter how many times you've fallen. The only thing that matters is how you choose to speak to life today. Because the moment you change your language, you change the script. And when you change the script, the story begins to transform. Chapter 3. Learn to speak the language of creation. Since the dawn of time, human beings have tried to decipher the language of the universe. Some searched for it in the stars, others in temples, some in the silence of meditation, and others in the noise of action. But the answer was always closer than they imagined. The universe doesn't respond to pleading or lamentation. It responds to certainty, to conviction, to the vibration of every word we speak and every thought we allow to bloom in our mind. Look around you. Every person you know is living inside a story they've built with their words. Some speak of themselves as victims of life, and everything that happens to them seems to confirm that script. Others, even if born into adversity, tell themselves a different story, one where every challenge is a stepping stone, every fall a lesson, every day a new opportunity to write a better chapter. It's not magic, it's quantum mechanics, it's neuroscience, it's the alchemy of the word in action. If your life were a book, what story would you be telling? And more importantly, if you could rewrite it starting today, what words would you choose to create your new reality? It's said that an old man lived on the top of a hill, watching the village below revolve around three great forces: health, love, and money. From his cabin, he saw young people chasing wealth with the energy of a storm, lovers clinging to their emotions as if they were the only real thing, and the sick longing for the time they once took for granted. The curious thing is that each of them believed they had found the ultimate answer to a full life, when in truth they only held a fragment of it. One afternoon, a traveler climbed the hill in search of answers. He had amassed enough money to never worry again, yet his body was worn out and his heart empty. "Tell me, old man, why do I feel like something's missing? I have everything, and yet I feel like I have nothing." The old man smiled and pointed to 3 stones on the ground. "Look at these stones. They are health, love, and money. If you carry only one, sooner or later you'll stumble. If you carry 2, you'll go further, but the weight of the one you lack will throw you off balance. Only when all 3 are in harmony can you walk without fear of falling." The traveler frowned. "But life doesn't work that way. Not everyone can have it all." The old man nodded. "It's not about having it all, but about not sacrificing one for the other. What good is a strong heart if it's alone? What good is fortune if you have no health to enjoy it? What good is love if hunger turns it into a burden? The key is in the dance between them, and that dance is what most people forget. The illusion that one is enough." Throughout life, we're taught to prioritize. Some choose health as their sacred temple, protecting it with almost religious devotion, but forgetting that a strong body without purpose becomes a well-decorated prison. Others dive into love, believing that it alone is enough, only to discover that when the bills arrive and the plates are empty, promises don't feed you. And then there are those who sacrifice everything for money, convinced that with it they can buy the rest, until loneliness and illness remind them there are things no amount of wealth can restore. Every story we know tells us the same thing in different ways. The entrepreneur who spent decades building his empire only to discover that his heart couldn't bear the weight of stress. The couple who loved each other madly, but whose dreams were crushed by the lack of stability. The athlete who treated his body like a temple but never found someone to share the journey with. None of these stories is unique. They are all repetitions of a universal pattern, the false belief that 1 out of the 3 is enough to feel complete. So how do you balance something that seems impossible to balance? The answer isn't in trying to divide everything into equal parts, but in understanding that each of these areas will take the spotlight at different times in life. There will be seasons when health must come first, moments when love needs to be at the center, and periods where financial stability becomes the foundation on which everything rests. The mistake isn't in giving more attention to one over the others during certain times. It's in forgetting the other 2 entirely. It's not about living in a constant state of paranoia, trying to keep everything perfectly balanced, but about not losing sight of any of them for too long. The traveler looked at the old man with a newfound clarity. "Then how do I know when I'm neglecting one of the 3? The old man picked up a glass of water and tilted it slightly. "If you pour all your energy into one side, the water spills. Life gives you signs. When your body starts to feel tired for no reason, when love becomes routine or a burden, when money makes you feel trapped instead of free, that's your signal." The traveler nodded silently. Because in life, true wealth is not found in accumulation, but in learning how to sustain. The traveler descended from the hill with a new certainty. He now understood that it wasn't about chasing just one goal, but about learning to move the pieces wisely. But in the village, things remained the same. There were those who spent their youth as if they had eternity guaranteed, neglecting their bodies and their peace of mind with the promise that later there would be time to rest. Others traded their love for stability, exchanging honest connection for convenient relationships that shielded them from the discomfort of loneliness. And there were those who believed health was a luxury that could be bought later, as if the body were a car you could replace part by part once it started breaking down. The great trap of when. When I have money, I'll enjoy life. When I find someone who loves me, I'll be happy. When I retire, I'll finally rest. The problem with when is that it never really arrives, or when it does, it brings with it new worries, new obstacles, new emptiness. People live as if they were in a permanent waiting room, convinced that happiness is at the next station, in the next promotion, in the relationship that hasn't yet come. But in the meantime, life keeps moving forward. Imagine someone who spends years chasing professional success. They sacrifice, work non-stop, postpone their well-being, ignore their body and emotions with the promise that one day they'll reap the rewards. When they finally achieve it, they realize they're exhausted. The people they loved are gone, and their body no longer responds with the same vitality. They've reached the finish line, but they're too drained to celebrate. And then comes a devastating realization. What was sacrificed along the way cannot be recovered. The true power of choice. Most people are unaware that every word they speak shapes their destiny. Those who say, "I don't have time to take care of my health," are issuing a decree for future illness. Those who repeat, "There's no such thing as true love," are sentencing themselves to distrust and loneliness. And those who insist, "Money is hard to get," are closing the doors to abundance before even trying. Words don't just describe reality, they create it. But more importantly, every decision we make is a vote for the kind of life we want to have. Every time you choose to stay late at work unnecessarily, you're voting for money over health or love. Every time you postpone exercising because you're too busy, you're choosing illness over wellness. Every time you settle for less than you deserve in a relationship, you're choosing company over true connection. There are no neutral decisions. Everything we do either brings us closer to or pulls us away from the balance we seek. But here's the best part. Just as we've built our reality through past choices, we can rebuild it with the choices we make today. It doesn't matter if you prioritized money for years and now feel that love and health have slipped away. It doesn't matter if you believed love was enough and neglected financial stability. It doesn't matter if you sacrificed your well-being chasing a future that never came. The story doesn't end here. Because at any moment, you can decide the story changes. In a corner of the world where few ever look, something happened that is worth remembering. A man stood at the edge of the abyss. He wasn't a Hollywood artist or a star athlete. He had no millions waiting in a bank account or a golden opportunity knocking at his door. He was an ordinary man, like any other, who had built his life through effort and sacrifice, until one day he lost everything. His business failed, his marriage collapsed, and with the weight of failure on his shoulders, he ended up sleeping in his car, parked on the corner of a city that no longer felt like his own. What once was routine, waking up, working, building, moving forward, became an act of survival. The first night in his car was the hardest. The silence became a ruthless judge, reminding him of every wrong decision, every missed opportunity, every broken promise. And then, in the darkness, something clicked. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror and said, "If I don't get up from this, then everything will have been for nothing." It wasn't a mystical revelation or a cinematic epiphany. It was a decision. The decision to change the story he was telling himself. The next morning, he wrote the only thing he knew for sure in a notebook. "I'm going to rebuild my life, but this time I'll do it right." And beneath that sentence, he wrote 3 rules. 1. I will no longer say I'm a failure. 2. I will not accept a life that doesn't make me happy. 3. I will not give up even if no one believes in me. Those words became his anchor. He had no money, no home, no backup. But he had something many take for granted, a new narrative. Words are commands we give the universe. They are instructions for the mind, for the body, for the energy around us. When we say, "I can't," we're programming our biology to give up. When we say, "It's impossible," we're closing every door before even knocking. But when we say, "This is just the beginning," something shifts. He understood that, and that understanding changed everything. Months passed, and each day became a test of resilience. He worked wherever he could, trained in what he was passionate about, and rewrote every thought that had once dragged him down. And when he least expected it, life responded. He met a mentor who taught him what he'd never learned about business. He discovered that his failure wasn't a conclusion. It was a rough draft that could still be revised. And over time, he rebuilt his company, not just recovering what he'd lost, but reaching a level of success he had never imagined. One day, during an interview, he was asked what the key to his transformation was. He didn't mention strategies or connections. He didn't talk about luck or talent. He simply said, "The words we choose either build us or break us. I chose to build myself again." This story is not about success. It's not about money, power, or recognition. It's about understanding that each one of us holds the most powerful tool in the universe, the word. What you say becomes what you are. If you keep telling yourself that life is hard, it will be. If you believe that love brings pain, pain is what you'll attract. If you affirm that money is out of reach, it will never come. But if you choose to say, "Everything good comes to me at the perfect moment," you'll begin to see doors open that once seemed closed. If you choose to say, "I am enough," the world will stop demanding more than you already are. If you choose to say, "I have the power to create my destiny," then you will become the architect of your life. Words are not disposable. They are not just sounds carried by the wind. They are decrees, contracts with reality, keys that either open or lock the paths before you. Words build universes. They are not mere noises or marks on a page. They are invisible structures that define what we perceive and experience. And yet, most people use them with the same attention they'd give to tossing stones into a river, unaware that each word they speak is a decree, a command etched into reality. Let's consider something curious. Why do people who constantly say, "I'm a disaster," seem to stumble more often? Why do those who say, "I never have any luck," tend to accumulate unfortunate experiences? The answer runs deeper than we think. It's not just about perception or how our brain filters reality. It's because language itself is the mold of our existence. Science supports this. Numerous studies have shown that the language we use affects how we see the world. There are tribes whose language lacks words for certain colors, and they simply don't perceive them. Not because they're colorblind, but because their brains were never trained to see what they can't name. And the same thing happens with our possibilities. If we don't have the words to imagine a different future, we become trapped in the same old cage. If someone says, "I'm useless," their brain treats it as fact, not exaggeration. If they repeat it enough, their nervous system responds accordingly, lowering their energy, shutting down their enthusiasm, closing doors before they can even reach for them. Because language is not just description, it is programming. And here's where it gets serious. Because if our words create our reality, what happens with what we hear? With what was said to us as children? With the decrees others placed on us without our consent? If a parent constantly says, "You're clumsy," the child's mind will accept it as truth and shape it into part of their identity. It doesn't matter if the child excels in other areas. If that phrase is repeated often enough, their mind will make them act accordingly. An adult can spend years in therapy trying to undo the words someone else planted in their head. The good news is that this works both ways. If negative programming can mark us for life, then positive reprogramming can set us free. And this is where the power of conscious speech comes into play. It's not enough to simply stop saying negative phrases. We must replace them with declarations that build us up. The simple act of changing an "I can't" into "I'm learning" can mean the difference between a life of limitation and a life of growth. Think of someone you admire. It doesn't matter if they're an artist, an entrepreneur, a writer, or a philosopher. They all have one thing in common. The way they speak reflects the way they think, and the way they think defines their destiny. Steve Jobs didn't talk about limitations. He spoke about possibilities. Muhammad Ali didn't say, "I hope I win." He said, "I am the greatest." They didn't wait for reality to give them permission to believe in themselves. They spoke their future into existence until it became their present. So how can we apply this to our daily lives? The key is to develop absolute awareness of our language. It's not about repeating empty phrases in front of a mirror. It's about taking control of the words we use every day, in every conversation, in every thought. Here's a powerful exercise. For one whole day, pay attention to the words you use. Don't try to change them, just observe. Notice how often you say things like, "This is hard," "What a problem," "I'm so tired." Then try to replace them with words that empower you. Instead of "this is hard," say, "This is an interesting challenge." Instead of "what a problem," say, "This is an opportunity to learn something new." At first, it might feel forced, but over time, your brain will begin to adapt to this new language. And if this sounds too simple to be real, think of the story of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. Despite losing everything, he discovered there was one freedom that no one could ever take away: the freedom to choose his thoughts and his words. In the worst of all hells, he chose to keep his mind his own. And thanks to that decision, he not only survived, he became one of the greatest minds in 20th century psychology. That is what it means to take control of your word. It's not about surface-level positivity. It's about understanding that language is the steering wheel of your life. Every word you speak, every thought you repeat, is a brick in the construction of your destiny. So here is the key question. What kind of reality are you building with your words? Are they words that expand you, or words that trap you? The answer lies in every sentence you speak. Now that you know it, the power is in your hands. Words are not just sound, not just symbols on a page. They are the architecture of our reality, the key that opens or closes doors in both our mind and our destiny. But there is something even more powerful than understanding the impact of words, realizing that each one of us has the ability to use them to create the life we truly desire. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for a miracle. They say, "I hope something changes. I hope luck finds me. I hope the universe listens." But the real magic doesn't happen while we wait. The magic begins the moment we understand that we are the spell. That what we declare with conviction not only transforms our perception, it literally shapes the events we experience. If you could see the power of every word before you spoke it, you'd think twice before complaining, before saying, "I can't," before calling yourself a failure. Because the moment you speak it, the universe has already received your command. This isn't superstition. It's science. It's physics. It's psychology. For decades, research has shown that repeated thoughts and words create neural pathways that reshape how we act and how we see the world. Those who constantly talk about problems end up seeing them everywhere. Those who speak of possibilities begin to find them, even in places where others see only dead ends. Years ago, a man hit absolute rock bottom. He had lost everything: his money, his home, his credibility. He woke up each day in a small borrowed apartment, wondering when his life had taken such a sharp turn. Until one day, staring at his reflection in the mirror, he decided to do something that felt absurd. He started speaking to himself as if he had already achieved everything he wanted. "I am successful," he said. "I am prosperous," he repeated. He had no proof of it, but he said it with such conviction that his body began to respond. His attitude changed, his energy shifted, and within months, the opportunities that once seemed impossible began to appear. This man wasn't a mystic. He wasn't enlightened. He had no special gifts. He was someone who realized that words don't just describe reality, they build it. And he decided to take control of that construction. But here comes the most important part. Language isn't only what we say out loud. It's also what we whisper to ourselves in silence. The inner conversation we hold is the most powerful of all. If there's a voice inside you that says, "I'll never be enough," then even if the whole world applauds you, you'll still feel empty. If there's a voice inside you that says, "I don't deserve to be happy," then even if all the doors open, you'll find a way to close them before stepping through. The final question is this: what narrative are you building inside yourself? Is it a story where you are the main character, the creator of your destiny? Or is it a story where you are a victim of circumstance, waiting for something external to rescue you? Because here's the truth no one taught us in school. There are no saviors. There is no destiny carved in stone. There is no unchangeable script. There are words, and words create paths. So choose wisely. Choose words that lift you up, that expand you, that make you bigger than your fears. Use your voice to declare what you want, to decree the life you deserve, to remind yourself that every phrase you speak is a seed in the garden of your existence. And if you ever doubt, if you ever feel the noise of the world dragging you back into thoughts that don't serve you, try this simple but powerful exercise. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and say to yourself, "I am a creator. I am powerful. My words carry weight, and starting today, I choose to use them to build the life I want." But this is not the end. It is only the first step of a journey with no return, a journey toward a more conscious, fuller, more authentic life. Because now you know, every word you speak is a bridge to your destiny, and every thought you choose is a seed that will bear fruit. If this audiobook stirred something within you, if at any point you felt these words were also yours, then don't stop here. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep awakening with us. Here at Let There Be Light, there are more doors to open, more truths to uncover, more paths to walk. We'll meet again in the next audiobook, and until then, remember, success, fulfillment, happiness, they're not out there waiting for you in some distant corner of the future. They're not a prize. They're not a destination. They are the pulse of the universe pushing you forward. They are the love of God beating in every breath. They are this exact moment in which you exist. And now you know it well. Your word creates your world. And your world begins right now. See you soon.